Disruption. Man, it's a word we hear all the time, right? It usually means some big, shocking, out-of-nowhere change. But what if I told you that's only half the story? Today, we're going to peel back the layers on this buzzword and find out what disruption really is, and more importantly, how much of it you can actually see coming from a mile away. Let's get into it. So, here's the big question we're tackling today. Is disruption always a complete surprise? You know, like a lightning strike from a clear blue sky? Or are there patterns, things we can learn to spot? The answer, well, it could completely change how you look at your entire industry. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at something called the rhythm of change. Then, we'll break down why not all disruption is created equal. After that, we'll trace the predictable path that ideas follow, and finally, we'll talk about how you can use all this knowledge to get a serious advantage.
Okay, first up, the rhythm of change. It might feel like the market is just pure chaos, but it turns out there's a surprisingly clear and recurring pattern hiding in plain sight.
And that pattern is this relentless cycle of peace, war, and wonder. It starts with the wonder of a brand new invention that then leads to a peaceful time where big companies just compete by adding more features to their products. But that peace always gets shattered by a war, a massive shift when that product gets turned into a commodity, an everyday utility. And this cycle just goes on and on. You have wonder, the birth of something totally new. Then comes peace, where giant companies grow and dominate the market. And finally, war, when that whole market gets turned on its head by industrialization, which, of course, creates the space for the next big wonder. It's a loop that never stops. Which brings us to a really important idea here. Not all disruption is equal. This is the moment we learn to separate those random bolts from the blue from the storm you can actually see brewing on the horizon. So let's get this straight. On one hand, you have unpredictable disruption. This is one product going up against another product. Think Coke versus Pepsi. It all depends on what individual companies decide to do, which is, well, pretty hard to guess. But on the other hand, you have predictable disruption. This is when a product gets replaced by a utility. This isn't a surprise attack, it's an inevitable evolution as a market grows up. A perfect example of that unpredictable product versus product fight is the iPhone taking on the BlackBerry. You know, even the guy who came up with disruption theory, Clayton Christensen, he famously dismissed the iPhone at first. Why? Because trying to predict who's going to win a feature war before it happens is, it's pretty much impossible. But, and this is the big but, that shift from a product to a utility, like moving from buying software in a box to just using cloud services, that is a completely different ballgame. It's a pattern, it's a change you can see coming, sometimes decades away. And here's the kicker. This kind of disruption isn't just predictable, you can actually defend against it if you know what to look for. So if this big shift is so predictable, what does the road actually look like? Well, our next section maps it out. How does something go from just a spark of an idea to a common, everyday utility? Turns out, it follows a pretty clear, four-stage journey. It all kicks off at stage 1, Genesis. This is the absolute beginning, the birth of something totally new. It's rare, nobody really gets it yet, and people aren't quite sure what it's even for. Think about the very first room-sized computers. Then, once people figure out, hey, this thing is actually useful, we hit stage 2, custom built. The idea starts getting used, but in very specific, one-of-a-kind ways. Every company is building their own version from scratch. It's valuable, for sure, but there's no standard. Next up, stage 3, product. This is where those custom-built solutions start to become standardized. The first commercial products hit the market, they get better, they get more features, and this is that peace era we talked about, where the big market giants are born. And then you have the final stage, stage 4, utility. The product becomes so common and well understood that it can just be mass-produced and offered as a stable service, like electricity from the grid. This is what triggers that huge, sudden shift, that punctuated equilibrium that makes the old product-based way of doing things totally obsolete. This is the predictable disruption we can all learn to see. Okay, so we've got the theory down. How do we actually put this to work? This is where it gets really fun. Let's jump into our last section, gaining the high ground and turning all this theory into action. Look, the bottom line is this. If you don't have a map of your business landscape, if you don't understand where everything in your world is on that evolutionary journey, you have almost zero chance of telling the difference between a predictable storm and just random chaos. You need what they call situational awareness. And hey, this is not some new idea. We're talking ancient wisdom here. Over 2,000 years ago, the military strategist Sun Tzu wrote that the best leaders win because of foreknowledge. It's simple, really. Knowing the terrain and knowing what's coming next is the ultimate strategic advantage.
So how do you get that foreknowledge? You have to be actively gathering intelligence. Sun Tzu talked about all these different methods, from knowing the local terrain to understanding your enemy's spies. The main idea is exactly the same today. You have to constantly gather information to build an accurate map of your world. A fantastic modern way to think about this is the OODA loop, which was developed by another military strategist, John Boyd. It's a really simple but super powerful cycle. You observe what's going on, you orient yourself using your map and your knowledge, you decide what to do, and then you act. And then you do it all over again, faster and faster.
And this right here is the whole point. When you have better awareness and can spin through that OODA loop faster than your competitors, you can literally operate inside their decision cycle. You're making moves before they can even figure out what's happening. It creates confusion, it creates paralysis, and it puts you in control. So, we'll end right where we started, but now, hopefully, with a totally new perspective. We've seen the patterns, we've seen the predictable path that everything follows. The only real question left is the one you have to ask yourself. Do you have a map?